Listening is being able to be changed by the other person. What's up? I'm Chad Littlefield, and I'm really excited that you are here in this moment to unpack why is active listening actually important in relationships. In this video, we're gonna unpack Spotify's tagline, which I think is a really cool framing for listening. I'm gonna share a very vulnerable personal story that taught me really what listening was, which kind of has led me to replacing the phrase active listening with something else that I think is much better and much more deliberate. And then last but not least, I'm gonna teach you a method to listen really impactfully that comes from me and Will's book, Ask Powerful Questions, Create Conversations That Matter. I get to help make connection and engagement really easy for some of the coolest leaders and educators on the planet. So however you ended up on this video, by the end of it, what is in my brain will be in your brain, and these might just work a whole lot better. Let's get into it. Okay, so earlier this week, I was prepping for a workshop that I was leading with a bunch of educators, and I went to pull up playlists. I was gonna be sharing music through Zoom, and I jumped onto Spotify's website, and it was the first time I wasn't logged in, and it was the first time that I saw their splash page tagline, which is, listening is everything. What a cool concept, right? Listening is everything. You know, I kind of started with this quote from Alan Alda from MASH, that listening is being able to be changed by the other person. But I think this idea that listening is everything is really valuable. In fact, you know, I showed you before that Will and I wrote a book called Ask Powerful Questions, Create Conversations That Matter, but I think we're overdue to write a sequel called Listening is Everything. Because if you could ask the best questions, you could be the most curious, you could be the best conversationalist, but if the other person isn't listening, or if you're not listening, that conversation is dead. Or in other words, that relationship could be dead as well if listening is not happening on repeat. Now, even though the video is titling Unpacking Why is Active Listening Really Important, I would say I've got a much more deliberate, better phrase to replace that idea of active listening. Because active listening is typically talked about in like corporate trainings as like, you know, don't look at your watch when someone's talking, lean forward, say right? It's very, very behavioral. And I think that really, really phenomenal listening is mostly invisible, right? It's sure, right? You don't want to be texting while someone's talking to you, but really great listening is often a bit invisible, right? You might be leaning in, you might be doing all the behavioral things of active listening, but you can still be tuned out thinking about something else. And this became very apparent to me in a tough conversation that my wife and I were having in our living room in an old apartment when we first moved to Asheville, North Carolina, which I don't live in anymore. I'm recording this in Pittsburgh right now. Anyway, tangent. We're sitting on the couch and she goes to say something, and I'm really, really clear in that moment that I got it. Like a light bulb went off. I feel like I finally heard her, and I jumped in and I started to reflect back what I thought I was hearing. I kind of interrupted what she was saying, and she paused me in that moment and said something super useful and profound to me, which is, Chad, you are not listening to get information from me. You are listening as an act of love so that I feel heard. Did I marry somebody cool or what? But I think this is so true. This idea that even if you do know what the other person's going to say, it is not useful to them to jump in and say it for them, right? Sometimes as people, we need to process things out loud. We need to hear ourselves say something in order to feel heard. We need to say it out loud, see it absorbed by the other person so that we actually feel heard. Do I fail at this on a weekly, maybe daily basis? Yeah, right? It's a constant effort to listen as an act of love, set aside my assumptions for a minute and just really listen with curiosity. But listening is everything. The phrase that I would invite you to replace active listening with is careful listening. Careful listening is a way that you're being and a way that you're listening that is full of care, where you are just leaning to that person, you really care what they have to say, you're seeking to understand, you're not listening to fix their problem, you're not listening to win or one-up them, you're not listening to be right, you're just listening because you care about them so much that you want to hear every word. You're hanging on every single word, every single phrase, every single emotion, every single thing that's unsaid in the music behind the words. You're just there. You're just fully present with what they have to offer. And when you do careful listening, people tend to feel heard. The book, Ask Powerful Questions, walks through each chapter is based on a different pyramid where we talk about the skills and tools to be able to create meaningful connection. And it's not until the 4th chapter that we really get to listening, because there's a lot of groundwork that has to be laid. And yet, if we don't get to this level of listening, we can never, ever graduate to empathy. And empathy is when you're able, and I think careful listening gets you there a lot faster, but empathy is where you're able to step at least one of your feet into somebody else's shoes to see a piece of their world. And when you see a piece of their world, people don't repeat themselves in conversations. People feel really heard. People trust you to share information they wouldn't share with anybody else, right? There's all of these benefits that show up when you're able to step into somebody else's world and they understand that you're with them, you're on their team. Even if you don't agree with everything they say, you are there on their side. And that is a really profound shift. And in fact, I would say that taking Alan Alda's quote one step further, that the way that we listen actually has the power to change what people say. And I've seen it over and over and over again. When somebody is clearly not listening, people speak less, they are a little bit less vulnerable, they don't share ideas that could be really valuable to an organization, to a team, or to an individual relationship. Partner in crime and co-author Will Wise, his old Gmail address used to be wiselistening@gmail.com. And I love that concept of careful listening, wise listening, whatever it is. And the reason I share that is my invite is to take your listening wisdom up a notch, right? Graduate a little bit. Now, I promised I was gonna share one of my favorite practical tools from the book. In the chapter, we unpack this whole idea of reflective listening. We shared 4 different levels that you can reflect at. The one that I'm gonna share with you here is reflecting a simple translation of what somebody said. And this is when you hear somebody else's words, one way to ensure that they feel heard is to reflect back what they said in your own words. So you might take a few of their words and a few of your words, mash them together and reflect them back. Let's just play with this real quick. So let's say Marcus Cicero said, "Silence is one of the great arts of conversation" to me. I could simply translate that and say, it sounds like for you that silence is essential to having really good dialogue. Do you see how I just simply translated that a little bit and then fed it back? I bet that Marcus would feel quite heard if I were to reflect that back. And if he doesn't, if he feels like you've misheard him, he will jump in and correct and adjust whatever it is that you've said. And that is really useful too, right? Listening can help you get aligned. If you reflect and reflect and reflect what somebody else is sharing, eventually you're gonna get it, and eventually you're gonna be on the same page and feel like you're moving in the same direction. This video was a little bit slower and more philosophical than most of my videos. If you made it to this point in the video, you're my kind of peeps. I'm glad to have you here. If you liked this video, you'll love this video on how to have conversation without asking questions. Kind of an interesting thing coming from somebody whose name is on a book about asking questions, but how do you have conversations without asking questions? And in that, I unpack the 4 levels of reflective listening. It would be a really great deep dive. If you appreciated this and the concepts, post regular videos on the channel, and you can pick up the book on audiobook and Kindle and Amazon, wherever books are found. I'm Chad Littlefield. It was lovely hanging out in cyberspace with you. You rock. Have an awesome day.